Elellanar's voice sliced through the refined atmosphere of the dining room like a sharpened blade, bringing all conversation to an abrupt halt. Standing confidently at the head of the table, my mother-in-law swirled the wine in her glass, a victorious smirk playing on her lips. "You were never really married," she declared. A stunned silence fell over the room. My husband, James, paled beside me, his grip on his fork going slack. His siblings and their spouses froze mid-bite. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner, marking the seconds of this perfectly executed ambush. I'm Victoria Matthews, and at 32 years old, I never imagined my marriage would be publicly challenged over a Sunday dinner. Then again, I never expected many things from Eleanor Blackwood. James's voice shook as he spoke. "Mom, what are you talking about?" His hand found mine under the table, and I squeezed it, keeping my expression unreadable. Eleanor's smirk deepened. "Oh, sweetheart, did you really think I'd let you go through with this? An event planner from a small town with no notable family name, hardly a match for a Blackwood. I did what was necessary to protect our legacy." Her sharp gaze turned to me, full of calculated malice. Chaos erupted. James's sister, Charlotte, let out a shocked gasp. His brother, Marcus, began arguing with their mother, and their father, Richard, merely stared into his whiskey glass as if it held the answers to an unspoken question. I, however, remained composed, a fact that seemed to unnerve Elellanar more than she'd anticipated. "Not even a reaction, Victoria?" she taunted. "No protests, no dramatic outburst?" I calmly reached for my purse hanging on the back of my chair. "Actually, Elellanar, I do have something to say, or rather, something to show you." Taking my time, I unlocked my phone under the weight of the family's scrutiny. You see, after our odd conversation last week about wedding documentation, I decided to look into things myself. Her confidence flickered. "What conversation?" "The one you had with Margaret at the country club," I replied smoothly, "where you bragged about hiring an actor to impersonate a priest and ensuring our marriage wouldn't be legally binding." I scrolled through my phone. "You should really be more cautious about where you discuss such things. Turns out the powder room has excellent acoustics." Eleanor's smirk vanished. "You were there?" "Not quite," I said, smiling, "but my friend was. You remember Sophia, the new club manager you humiliated last month? She happened to be in the stall when you walked in." I tapped my screen, and the room filled with Elellanar's own voice. "That little gold digger won't know what hit her. The priest is an actor, the marriage won't be legal, and when the time is right, I'll reveal everything. James will have no choice but to leave her." The room fell into stunned silence. Elellanar's face twisted in shock. "You're bluffing." I shook my head. "Oh, I haven't even gotten to the best part. After hearing this, I did some research. Would you like to know what I found?" She gripped the table, knuckles white. "The real Father Michael Thompson, the one you thought was conveniently out of town, wasn't. He performed our wedding as planned. Your actor never got the chance to step in because Father Thompson arrived first. Our marriage license, completely legitimate, filed with the county clerk's office the very next day." I pulled a folder from my purse and slid it across the table. "Feel free to verify it." James's hands trembled as he opened the folder, scanning the documents. Richard finally looked up, and the rest of the family stared at their mother in stunned horror. Elellanar's voice wavered. "But how?" I smiled. "Did you really think I wouldn't double-check everything? I'm an event planner, Elellanar. I don't leave things to chance." When Father Thompson called to confirm our ceremony, he mentioned someone had attempted to cancel him and hire a replacement. That's when I knew something was off. James pushed back his chair abruptly, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. "Mom, how could you do this? To me? To Victoria?" Elellanar's mask finally cracked. "James, sweetheart, I was only protecting you. She's not one of us." "No, Mom," James said, his voice hardening. "You don't understand. Victoria isn't just my wife, she's the best thing that's ever happened to me." He looked around the table, his expression unreadable. "And now, everyone knows the truth about you." He reached for my hand, gripping it tightly. We had prepared for this moment, yet seeing his mother's true nature laid bare hurt more than either of us had expected. Elellanar slumped into her chair, her control unraveling. "Richard," she pleaded, "say something." But Richard Blackwood had already made up his mind. "I think you've said enough, Elellanar." He turned to James and me, his voice steady. "Victoria, James, we owe you an apology." The realization settled over the room. This evening could have played out differently had Elellanar simply accepted me. Instead, she had exposed herself. The grandfather clock ticked on, marking the end of her iron grip over the Blackwood family. Dinner was over. But this was just the beginning. The fallout, the aftermath spread through Boston's elite circles like wildfire. Within days, Elellanar's carefully constructed reputation as the Blackwood matriarch crumbled. It wasn't just about her attempt to invalidate my marriage, it was about the deeper manipulations that had finally come to light. Sitting in my office at Matthew's Events, reviewing contracts for an upcoming charity gala, I wasn't surprised when Charlotte knocked on my door. She looked different, less polished, more real. "Got a minute?" she asked hesitantly. Of course, I gestured for her to sit. Over the past 2 weeks, she'd become an unexpected ally, revealing secrets about her mother that even James hadn't known. She handed me a folder. "Mom's trying to sell the summer house, the one that's been in the family for generations. Says she needs the money for a fresh start, but I found these in Dad's study." Inside were receipts, gambling debts, loans, all in Elellanar's name. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, scanning the pages. "Years," Charlotte admitted. "She's been draining family assets. That's why she was so desperate to keep you out. She was afraid you'd uncover her mess." The irony wasn't lost on me. She had called me a gold digger, yet she was the one foaming the family's wealth. "Does your father know?" I asked. Charlotte shook her head. "He just signs whatever she gives him." But now, her expression darkened. "Now she's threatening to expose some of Dad's old business dealings if he doesn't comply. She's getting desperate." "Victoria." My phone buzzed, a message from James. "Mom's called an emergency family meeting tonight, says she has an announcement." I exhaled slowly. Eleanor wasn't finished yet. I showed the message to Charlotte, who let out an exasperated sigh. "She's going to try and control the narrative again." "Not this time," I said, my voice steady. "It's time everyone sees the real Eleanor Blackwood." That evening, we gathered in the Blackwood family library. Eleanor stood by the fireplace, her posture regal, her expression unreadable. Richard sat in his usual leather armchair, while James, Charlotte, Marcus, and their spouses took their places around the room. I remained standing, one hand resting on the folder that held Margaret's letter. "I've called this meeting because it's time to move past these unfortunate misunderstandings," Eleanor announced smoothly. "I'm willing to forgive recent events if we can come to an arrangement." James stiffened beside me, but I gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. Eleanor went on, outlining her demands: financial compensation, a public statement to restore her reputation, and, of course, reinstating her position in society. She was so caught up in her performance that she didn't notice Charlotte discreetly recording or Marcus positioning himself near the door. When she finally finished, I stepped forward. "That's quite an offer, Eleanor," I said, "but I have a counterproposal." She blinked, clearly thrown. "This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it concerns all of us, especially when you're trying to blackmail your own family into covering up your debts." Her expression faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about." I opened the folder and began reading aloud from Margaret's letter. With every word, her composure cracked. By the time I finished, she was gripping the mantelpiece, her face pale. "How dare you?" she whispered. "Those are private matters." Richard's voice cut through the silence. "You've been stealing from this family for years, and you call them private matters?" Eleanor turned to him, desperate. "Richard, I can explain." "Save it," he snapped. His gaze shifted to Charlotte and me. "Thank you for bringing this to light. It's time for real change in this family." Panic flickered in Eleanor's eyes as she realized she was losing control. She begged, threatened, tried to turn her children against one another. But this time, no one listened. As security escorted her from the house, I couldn't help but wonder how things might have been different if she had simply accepted me. Her obsession with getting rid of me had only destroyed herself. James wrapped his arm around my waist, his voice low. "I'm so sorry for everything she put you through." I turned to him, meeting his gaze. "Don't be." She thought she could break us apart, but she only made us stronger. Behind us, the Blackwood family had already begun to heal, discussing plans to fix the damage she had left behind. Sometimes, losing someone toxic is the only way to truly become a family. 6 months later, the Blackwood summer house, once a symbol of Eleanor's power, had been transformed into something new. Tonight, it wasn't a place of control and manipulation, it was a place of love. James and I were renewing our vows, reclaiming our story on our own terms. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that we were celebrating in the very house Eleanor had tried to sell to cover her debts. As I adjusted the floral arrangements, old habits die hard, Charlotte approached, holding a magazine. "Have you seen this?" she asked, showing me the latest society column. The headline read, "Disgraced Boston socialite spotted in Palm Beach, now a resort activities director." I couldn't help but smile. She always did love controlling other people's lives. Charlotte smirked. Dad's lawyers recovered most of the money, but she had it scattered across hidden accounts. "It'll take time, but she won't be setting foot in Boston society again anytime soon." A burst of laughter from the garden caught my attention. James was chatting with his father. Richard Blackwood had changed more than anyone since Eleanor's departure. He had stepped back from the company, focusing instead on repairing relationships with his children. "Victoria," Richard called, walking over, "everything looks perfect, but you shouldn't be working at your own celebration." "Once an event planner, always an event planner," I said, adjusting a banner. "Besides, this is different, this is family." The word carried a new weight. Just then, Marcus burst in, waving an envelope. "You won't believe what Mom just tried." We gathered around as he opened the letter. "She's demanding to be invited tonight. Says it's her right as the family matriarch to be present at all significant occasions." Instead of tension, laughter rippled through the room. "Should we tell her the party was last week?" Charlotte joked. "Or that we moved to Tibet?" James added. I took the letter, deliberately dropping it into the trash. "Or we could just enjoy our evening without giving her another thought." The ceremony was everything our first wedding should have been: genuine, joyful, surrounded by love. Father Thompson, the real one, officiated again, even jokingly checking everyone's credentials beforehand. During the reception, Richard clanked his glass for a toast. "A year ago," he began, "I thought I understood family. I believed it was about maintaining appearances, protecting our name, keeping to our own circle, but I was wrong." He turned to James and me. "Victoria, when you joined our family, I let Eleanor convince me you weren't our kind of people, but you've shown us what family truly is: honesty, resilience, and unconditional love. You didn't just marry James, you helped heal this entire family." Tears pricked my eyes as Richard raised his glass. "To Victoria and James, thank you for showing us a better way to be a family." Later that night, as James and I swayed to the music, he whispered, "Any regrets about how it all played out with Mom?" I thought about everything: Eleanor's manipulation, her downfall, and how, in trying to destroy my place in this family, she had only proven that she never understood what family truly meant. "None," I answered honestly. James smirked. "She called me yesterday, asked if I'd support her moving back to Boston. And I told her she lost the right to dictate our lives the day she tried to erase our marriage." I glanced around the room, at Charlotte teaching her kids a silly dance, at Marcus and his husband planning their adoption, at Richard finally allowing himself to relax and enjoy life. "We're doing just fine without her," I said. The summer house, once a monument to Eleanor's control, had become something else entirely. A home. A place where the real Blackwood family could finally thrive.